Kubernetes 1.27 was just released. Well, maybe a few months ago. I know, this is very late, but better late than never, right? I figure a lot of people watch these a month or two after release as they look to upgrade their clusters anyhow. You never release, or you never upgrade your clusters right as soon as it releases anyhow. And it'd be really weird to have a missing episode. Speaking of that, leave a comment with a version of Kubernetes you are using right now when you watch this video. Well, don't worry, my Kubernetes 1.28 release notes review are going to come out very, very shortly. Hopefully as soon as next week. I worked on the two of these at the exact same time. Yeah, I know, it's pretty terrible, but I had a lot going on in my life, so this kind of got shelved for a little bit. Anyhow, a lot of people really asked me to keep going on these, and so I'm going to, just for you. I hope that I haven't missed you. I hope that I haven't missed the people moving from 126 to 127, and I hope I can help guide your path into a bright, bright future. Well, that kind of sounded a little bit too much like a sales pitch. Now, before I get into these release notes, I have changed the release notes up a little bit once again to streamline them. To be honest, it's going to make them a little easier for me to produce and to make it easier for you to understand the current status of a feature we are talking about. One thing you will notice in my Kubernetes 1.27 and 1.28 release notes, I have removed the beta talk altogether. I find myself just repeating myself 3 times on a feature, sometimes more if it stays in beta or alpha longer than one release. And hopefully this will streamline it for not only me, but also for you. So I'm kind of spinning it as good for you, even though it's really to help me get these things out in time. And that's what I really want to do. I want to make sure that the future release notes are out on time and I have the time to do them right for you. Let's start these with the stats. There was a whopping 60 features released in the 1.27 release. 18 features were brand new features that just entered alpha. 29 features went from alpha to beta, and 13 features finally graduated little KEP school, little KEP college, and graduated to stable. They got their little robes on. It's fantastic. Just love those little KEPs. Remember, stable features are the only features that are on by default since Kubernetes 1.24's changed to the policy. But before we jump into features, let's talk about deprecations and removals, because these are really the things that are going to bite you in the when you're trying to migrate from one version to a newer version. Deprecations and removals. Now, like we had talked about in Kubernetes 1.26 release notes, the k8.gcr.io has been frozen, and it has been frozen for a few months now. It's registry.k8.io now. So make sure if you have a reference to this, that you change and update them right away. Storage.k8.io/v1 beta 1 was removed. There is a version 1 out now, so you should migrate your workloads to the v1 version ASAP. Well, especially before moving to version 1.27. There were a few other things, but really I don't think they would affect an end user of Kubernetes, as it was more of how other projects would interact, like the removal of sepcomp annotations. The pod security and mission code has already been updated to deal with this change, and there was really not anybody else that would need to have to worry about it. Though mind you, this was not the only thing. There were some feature gates, some things that got released to stable had their feature gates removed because as they become stable, they no longer have the feature gates. I'm not going to cover the feature gates that got removed because the feature is now stable. That would seem silly. The only other thing that I saw in the removals of any interest was the removal of the pod eviction timeout and the enable taint manager command line arguments, though I'm not really sure many people leverage those, but if you did, those are now gone. And we're already on to stable. Awesome. Remember, I'll keep these short as we have talked about them many times before. Make sure you watch all the release notes so that you stay up to date with what these are and how they work. Probably the most impactful one for all of you is KEP 2413, especially on the security side of things, is the seccomp default. So now you can turn seccomp on with a default profile provided by your container runtime just by pressing the simple seccomp default command line flag to the kubelet. Mind you, this is a kubelet setting, meaning you will need to do this on each and every node that you enable it on, so keep that in mind. If you thought that restricting memory and CPU just was not enough control for your inner micromanager, there is a new resource you can request and limit. That's right, KEP 2053, you can now request and limit the number of huge pages your application gets. Mind you, transparent huge page is management of huge pages. Transparent huge pages makes huge pages easy, though a lot of databases profess to not play well with them, so keep that in mind. In a follow-up, and of course something that we have already talked about extensively, is KEP 2926. Relax the update validation on jobs that have not been unsuspended. To let you mutate node scheduling directives, namely the pod's node affinity, selector, tolerations, scheduling gates, and labels of the pod's templates, letting you use a higher level queue controller to inject these types of things to your heart's content. That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. I also think that's going to be pretty useful for a couple of edge cases where you're really wanting to do that. It's not for everyone, but pretty awesome. Let's do a little rapid fire section just about some things that I know we've talked about quite a bit. Remember, these are things that we've covered quite a bit in the last 2 episodes of the release notes. If you want more details on these individual things, please go watch those release notes videos, as I'll have information on those. The much awaited feature, the time zone support in cron jobs, has finally made it to stable. So all of you who have been waiting and dying to use this feature, go be free. Use the wonderful, sweet time zone support in your cron jobs. In KEP 693, the node topology manager has continued better support for NUMA-enabled hardware. KEP 2885, the server-side unknown field validation is now stable, letting the server validate unknown fields. Now, in KEP 2727, you all love gRPC. That is what my YouTube stats tell me, at least. Adding gRPC probe to pod's container spec for liveness, readiness, and startup is now stable, bringing better gRPC support to the Kubernetes ecosystem. So stop complaining and get out there and write your gRPC services, as the support now is so much better in Kubernetes now that these are native things that you can add to your pod. Enough of the rapid fire. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the ones that haven't been talked about quite as much in the past episodes. The work on OpenAPI v3 specification in KEP 2896 was released. This work is designed to kind of level up the current OpenAPI v2 to v3. There was a lot of reasons for this work. For one, there was a messy conversion code to take the CRDs from v2, as CRDs used v3 spec to describe the resource. And so there was a conversion from the v3 spec to the v2. But on top of that, OpenAPI v3 spec is just more expressive and gives you a lot more flexibility. So the Kubernetes API should be just a bit better, and there's now better enum support in there as well. The last thing to hit stable is something you probably will never need to know about, hopefully. But a lot of work is going into it, so you can sleep easy at night. So here is me spreading the word as some awesome work is being done by the Kubernetes teams to provide better stability, better supportability, better security, and a whole bunch of other betters to the project that you might never know about. So in KEP 3744, a plan for keeping Kubernetes in sync with Go releases was made. Now, why is this a big deal, you might ask? Well, Kubernetes supports a release for 12 months, and Go supports a Go minor version for, you guessed it, 12 months. And what happens is, by the time a version of Go is adopted, they only have a few months of Go language support left. So they developed a plan to alleviate this issue. I'll let you read more about it yourself in the KEP, but it comes down to a 3-step plan. 1, track prereq changes in a new minor version of Go. 2, backport those changes into a release branch. And 3, update the minor release branches of Kubernetes. Okay, maybe I simplified it a little bit too much. If I went into any more detail, this video would be way too long and mostly just cover how they plan on supporting the most current version of Go in Kubernetes. I just wanted to point out that this is the type of thankless work that is well, not thanked. So here is my tribute to the engineers making this a reality. In the end, Kubernetes is so much better off with all of this hard work, and I just wanted to point it out. Let's move on to alpha. This is everybody's favorite part. Alpha, the bleeding edge of the bleeding edge. Let's talk about the alpha features. Features so fresh, so new, they're just too good for your production environment. But don't worry, the time I get these release notes out, many of these might already be in beta. So that's good news. That's the nice effect of me having some pretty late release notes. There were 18 brand new features released into Kubernetes in the alpha state. Everyone's favorite team, API Machinery, released 3 new features into alpha, though we're really only going to focus on 2 of them that I think are going to make the biggest impact on your developers' day-to-day life. KEP 3716 and 3488 both deal with the new cell emission webhooks. 3488 proposed the use of cell for admission control instead of the often more strenuous validating emission webhooks, building on the previous efforts done in KEP 2876 that added the support for the common expression language. This is what I refer to as cell. Let's get back to 3488. This brings you closer to be able to use cell to administer your admission webhooks in a flexible, more easily extended method right from your control plane. But we'll get more into that a little bit later. But the cell pandemonium does not stop here. No, it does not. Let me tell you, it seems like SIG API Machinery must love cell. KEP 3716, another KEP, another cell update. This one brings a match condition as a cell expression that must evaluate to true for the admission request to be sent to the webhook. This one is actually really important to get right because the behavior of this was not initially intuitive to me. At least I did not find it intuitive right off the bat. Let me know if you find it intuitive right off the bat. So it turns out that if no match condition is met, it means that all webhooks are skipped for that request, meaning it is implicitly allowed, not implicitly denied. So you can't have a catch-all in that regard. Now, I think this is a pretty big deal too. This feature should really help with the reliability and performance of your webhooks, as making a lot of round-trip network calls can be pretty expensive. And if you're able to eliminate all these network calls, it should be a pretty big deal. But I mean, really, fewer network calls, easier to debug, a central control. It should not only make debugging issues easier, but hopefully, as with all things, anything that you make simpler will incur fewer mistakes, easier to maintain, and things like that. So really nice work, API Machinery. I'm really looking forward to using the cell updates more than I have so far. Coming up next with 2 contributions to the bleeding edge of the future Kubernetes past, we have SIG CLI with 2 brand new features you just have to hear about. The first feature coming to kubectl is an alternate to the already existing prune flag. Many of us love using the apply command in kubectl, but sometimes we really, instead of updating the resource, want to delete and reapply the resource. This has been possible for a long time since Kubernetes 1.5 with the prune flag. But this has some really nasty ways of doing things and causes some really major issues, if I'm going to be honest. I honestly don't use it because of those issues, and if I wanted to do this, I just manually delete and then reapply the resource. I literally just do it myself, and that's never fun. Doing something manually yourself is never fun when we have tools, right? But now, with a new independent alpha feature and a new and improved, maybe even more importantly, a safer solution is being brought forward. This is super awesome, and I can't wait for it to hit prod. So the kubectl command, kubectl create, is really awesome because you can create a bunch of different YAMLs for a bunch of different things. But there are a lot of resources it does not support, and it definitely does not support any CRD that you use or are making, meaning you can't use it on a lot of stuff that you may use quite a bit. I know I use a couple custom resource definitions a lot, and it would be really great if this kubectl create command could do that for us. So command shadowing would let you do this. Basically, it would let you make a plugin that would support a command like kubectl create Merrick's awesome resource. Now, this Merrick's awesome resource is not a subcommand of the create, but if you make a kubectl plugin for it, it could be. So basically, we can start making plugins that fill in some of these parts that don't already have a built-in command. That's one of the requirements, is that there is no built-in subcommand for whatever you're creating. Because let's be honest, really, the CLI team can't support your CRD, my 86 CRDs that I've made over the last few years, and all of the other sprawling CRDs that exist out there. And I think that this actually has implications beyond just the kubectl create, even though it's a great example. There's a lot of different commands you could extend, and so I think it's a really interesting feature. Now, let no one say that SIG Network didn't show up and bring it for Kubernetes 1.27. SIG Network is bringing the pain to the networking of your local Kubernetes cluster. I mean, fixing the pain? Talking about pain, dual stack. Yeah, the thing people do when they really hate their lives. Leave a comment if you're one of those dual stackers. I know, and I'm not talking about Oreos. I'm talking about IPv4 and IPv6 at the same time. Anyhow, KEP 3705 brought better dual stack handling for cloud providers by adding the node IP flag to the kubelet for cloud providers. This originally was kind of a bare metal only solution, and we really wanted dual stacks in the cloud, especially with Amazon's changes where they're going to start charging us for IPv4. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to take the pain of the dual stack to the clouds. No more excuses. Get your dual stack socks on right now. Thankfully, SIG Network didn't just bring the pain. A possible really big improvement for those node port fans out there has come to fruition. Previously, having a static node port was kind of a dangerous game, as there was no guarantees that Kubernetes wouldn't assign another IP to that or something like that. And make it, or another service to that IP, and basically consume that port. But with KEP 3668, that could all be changing, letting you, the users of Kubernetes, define a set of static port numbers the cluster should not use, reserving them for static node ports. That's right. 2023 is the year of the node port. Now, the last KEP from SIG Network team is huge for the few people it's a problem for. As we all know, services are an abstract way to expose an application running on a set of nodes in a set of pods. Some type of services like cluster IP, node port, load balancers use cluster scoped virtual IP addresses. Now, these are across your whole cluster. Every service cluster IP must be unique. Trying to create a service with a specific cluster IP that has already been allocated will, of course, return an error. This is a problem only because currently there's no way to resize or increase the CIDR ranges assigned to any service. Remember, no natting in Kubernetes. So if you have overlapping networks, or you just have a lot of IPs and run out, you're kind of in big trouble. There are more issues with the current implementation than just that, and you can read those in the KEP. Needless to say, this KEP 1880, looks to solve these issues by leveraging multiple service CIDRs, letting you define new ranges of CIDRs. This is really actually kind of huge and awesome, and I have to say, nice work, network team. We're going to have to forgive them for IPv6 and dual stack changes just because of these nice things that they've brought. SIGNode was ultra busy this release, not supporting stable code, but releasing 6 brand new features. The biggest one, and if you've watched my video on running 512 pods on a single node, and if you haven't, you should just stop this video, go watch it, and then come back. This KEP is going to help with a lot of issues and make this simpler to understand. The kubelet has methods to limit image pools with QPS and burst, but they are confusing to use as they only limit the number of requests sent to the container runtime in a short period of time. And it takes in no consideration the current number of inflate image pools. This means that even if a small QPS is set, there can be many image pools in progress in parallel. If each pool takes a very long time, then even with QPS turned on with a short time, it's very easy to accrue a lot of image pull requests, and this can be a problem for your network. Now, I might argue you should make smaller images. That's really step one. Make smaller images. I have videos on that. But sometimes you just really need those big jumbo containers. And yes, I'm looking straight at you, Jupyter Notebooks. You have some of the largest containers I have ever seen. Anyhow, this KEP would add a new max parallel image pools configuration to the kubelet that sets a limit on the total number of in-flight calls. Setting this to 0 and subsequently the default parameter per the KEP will set no limit on parallel pools and is basically what you currently have. Of note, you cannot use this and serialize image pools, as obviously this is kind of setting it to exactly 1. All right, now here is a controversial one, letting you update a pod's resource requests and limits to be updated in place. Now, I know there is a heated debate if you should even use these limits at all. But if you do, the KEP 1287, you would be able to update them without restarting the pod or its containers. That's a really nice touch and has no effect on how you use Kubernetes. So when this goes into production, you might not even notice the update. I absolutely love it. I absolutely love it. Now, a KEP that really captured my nerdy side when reading through these was KEP 2570, adding memory quality of service with cgroups v2. If you know me, you know that I love control groups v2, and it's been a while in the making and in getting integrated with different systems. And we're starting to see that more things leverage cgroups v2, and memory quality of service has the ability to make huge improvements managing your memory-bound applications and ensuring that the pods that need the memory can get the memory that they need. Another big deal that dropped on this release from Signode is the support for user namespaces in Kubernetes. If that doesn't make sense, this would be a privileged process running in a pod that would be unprivileged on the host. This is maybe the biggest deal ever. And this is huge for the security area alone, as this feature alone would have completely prevented over 5 of the worst security events in the history of Kubernetes, including the Azure Scape issue with the first cross-account container takeover. Literally some of the worst stuff that has happened. If you'd like a video on the worst Kubernetes CVEs and account takeovers and things like that, let me know. I've kind of been thinking about it. I think it would be kind of fun. Anyhow, hands down, this is pretty awesome. And, because sometimes running as privileged or as a different user inside your containers is something you might want or need to do, whether it's working with a GPU or some other thing. So I really love to see it because, again, this would have prevented a lot of things from happening. Lastly, KEP 3063 added the ability for dynamic resource allocation, as there is an increase in deploying Kubernetes in new non-data center environments. Yeah, that's kind of a mouthful. Think edge computing. Those workloads no longer need just RAM and CPU, but also access to specialized hardware. Think GPUs, FPGAs, and French fry oven. That's right, you named it. That's what you were all thinking. You were thinking the French fry oven. Wait, I don't think that you put French fries in an oven. Anyhow, you get the idea. A lot of these things could actually be attached via the network, like FPGAs and storage, especially storage. I think probably the big deal here is storage. This KEP adds an API for network-attached things, much like the device plugin provided this access on the device itself. This is awesome and hugely anticipated. I love it. And that's it. We're done with our Kubernetes 1.27 release notes. How did you like them? Is this new format good, bad, ugly? See you in a few days for my Kubernetes 1.28 release notes, and in the future, hopefully I'll have a little more up to date on the release notes. This really streamlined the process a lot for me. I hope that you like it. I hope it makes it a little bit easier for me to release these release notes on time and with all the information that you need. Thank you for all your support. I absolutely love seeing you all come here, join, and watch these. And remember, if you did not like these release notes being 3 months late, tune in next Friday for release notes that are almost on time.